Welcome to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories of addiction, grief, recovery, and courage. And also from people who work every day in the field of substance abuse who discuss their experiences and advice. I'm Mike Torville, your host. Thank you all for joining us. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to Healing Voices Project. You know, each week we have some different guests, and I'm always learning something from somebody, and I have a feeling that today's going to go the same way. We have a guest. Her name is Magda Colon from Learn to Cope. Thanks for coming, Magda.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, Magda has been with Learn to Cope since 2020, so it's been about 2 years now. And you've been in the field for 20 years with different positions, and even prior to Learn to Cope, you were at the DA office. So you've got a lot of perspectives, a lot of things to share and talk about. And I know most of it was going to be about Learn to Cope and the programs that we have. And so we'll talk a little bit about Learn to Cope. And Learn to Cope, if anybody doesn't know, Learn to Cope is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. And it's a peer-led support network that offers education, resources, and hope for family members, with a focus on family members, right? And who have loved ones affected by substance abuse disorder. Now, it was founded by Joanne Peterson in 2014, so it's 18 years now. And it's an organization that has grown to include over 11,000 members and has become a nationally recognized program and a model for peer support group and prevention programming. We'll talk more about all that. But you've been there 2 years, and you joined in the midst of the pandemic, right?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
And a very interesting story because you talk a little bit about me working with the district attorney's office. And while I was working with the district attorney's office, I met Peter Babineau and Joanne as a team in one of the on a presentation or some sort of conference that we went to. And so one of my interests for a long time was bringing this kind of information and this kind of support for the Latino community. Because I understand that it's very hard for somebody to search for resources, right, to begin with. And when you don't understand or you don't speak the language and it's not your cup of tea, then it becomes that much more difficult.
Right. It's challenging even without the language.
Oh, gosh,
barrier.
yes.
Yeah.
So as we're meeting them, I just come up with that thought. Like, I'm here because of this. And she said, well, I've been wanting to do a Spanish group for a very, very long time. What about that? And I said, well, let's talk about it. And that's how we begin our conversations about starting a Spanish group and having that conversation in regards to me leading that effort to get that Spanish group going. So right now we have 2 Spanish groups.
Okay.
One is virtual, and it meets on Wednesday nights. And the second one is in person, and it's in Holyoke in Appleton Street. But we'll talk a little bit more.
And you run both?
And I run both.
And on Learn to Cope, which, by the way, we should say the website, learn the number 2 cope, C-O-P-E. So it's learn number 2 cope.org. And on that website, and I've been through it quite a bit, you've got a lot of information. And I think particularly the meetings, education, and resources have a wealth of information. You have all kinds of videos and programs and so on that I found just endless. Great stuff.
They are. And so we could think about what a family needs to keep it together, right? And find the resources and come up with solutions and ideas that might work. And that's what they attempt to do. And that's why there's a lot of information. There's signs and symptoms. There's self-care sometimes when we work with families that come out to us. Like really, their world have turned upside down because they just realized that their loved one is suffering from addiction.
Well, you know, I was thinking about something on the way in here, too, and you just said it, and thanks for the reminder. When you say they suddenly realize, but it's never a sudden thing. Because, and you said something earlier, signs and symptoms. And it's not normally like somebody wakes up and says, oh my gosh, this person is addicted. It doesn't happen that quickly, but there is a point when you realize there's something that needs to be done. And the signs and symptoms that were there earlier and maybe a little fuzzy and people didn't recognize them, or they questioned it or second guessed them, and finally they realize we can't kid ourselves anymore, right? So some of those signs and symptoms, when a family's early on and suspecting, I get that's a critical point, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
Yeah.
It is a critical point. Unfortunately, we're reactive. We're kind of a reactive society, right?
Right.
And it's hard to get people to think about things ahead of time. You question yourself, say, well, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe we could figure it out. We
Yes.
could solve it at home.
Or they attribute it to something else. I was just going through a phase. He's moody. Oh, he just lost his girlfriend. So yeah, I expect him to be not himself a little bit. There's
Yeah.
things that you attribute it to out of convenience sometimes, right?
Yes, and that question about are you okay outside of being okay, is it done? Yeah, are we really asking our kids or our loved ones, how okay are you?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to say I'm okay, right?
That's a natural answer. Sure, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm
fine.
fine. Yeah.
Things are working.
Thanks for asking.
Exactly.
That's the end of it.
And that's it, right? But
Right.
but can
Yeah.
we do a little bit of that? So some of our meetings will prepare people. We give that conversation points. We try it with each other, and we look at the things that have happened in your life, in their family structure that might have given them hints or tips or anything that something was going on, and then work through it. Because now that you realize and it hits you that this really is going on, the guilt and the pain, and why haven't I done this beforehand, and all these other things that go through your mind when your hands are tied to helping the person that you love the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so we help people work through that within conversation.
Now let's talk about some of those signs too, because
Sure.
again, they're pretty common, right? But again, if you see them, for example, let's say I have a friend who not suddenly, but just gradually I realized, and it suddenly occurred to me that something's wrong here because he sleeps a lot more than normal. And in fact, I'll call him at 2 in the afternoon, and he said he just woke up. Now that's not normal. So what's wrong? Oh, I'm just tired. Oh, I didn't sleep last night. Or the answers are just pretty mundane, and you go, oh, all right, then so you accept that and move on. But then it continues, and then that person misses events that normally you would attend to. It could be a family birthday or whatever, and they start missing those events, and you go, gee, I wonder if that's tied to the sleeping thing. And then the person says, oh, I have headaches all the time, and now the doctor gave me this pill for that and this pill for that. And anyway, you notice changes in behavior, and over time you start to put all these puzzle pieces together and say, yeah, he's not the same. But by then it's progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just an example of a few signs, but you've seen other signs that families struggle with trying to figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah, there's things like you talked about missing appointments or being inconsistent with work.
Yeah.
I think once you become an adult and you become inconsistent with work, that's a big sign. Some of the parents say Friday, guess what? The check is in his hand and gone. We don't see them until Monday. So some of those things that are just drastic in your face may be a possibility that something is going on. So a good conversation around help. And one of the things that happen with this is that conversation becomes difficult because parents are parents all the time. And the expectation of your child, between you and your child as being a parent, enforcer, who's take care of me, all this other thing, oh, it's too much in my business, I am going to black them out completely. So how to have those conversations in a way that people, or that your kids, or that your loved one will be willing and able to listen. And you, as a parent, will be willing and able to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a kind of like two-way thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things comes with the pain, sometimes disappointment, trust that have been broken, all these other things in one side. And then the other side will be like, oh my God, he's in my business again, he doesn't trust me. All these other things that are real emotions that are going through somebody's mind. Now, how do we get away from those
And
have
avoid
this
the
conversation?
resistance and detachment that results from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that and then now you can't talk to the person because he's avoiding me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
'Cause,
now
yeah.
it's gone. He's not answering texts. He's not answering phone. He's not coming around. So having the language and having the practice and having a group to kind of vent it, right? Because now you vent it. You have a group of people that you could scream and tell whatever is in your heart, as long as you respect the boundaries of the group. But whatever is in your heart, and get opinions and get experiences and hear some other people tell you, this is how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I did. I went there and they helped me out. I went there and they were able to do this for me. And that's what Learn to Cope kind of does and provides that space as safe because it's confidential. We don't want to tell anybody what's happening in that group.
Of course, right.
And we provide that practice and that follow-up. Like the next week, somebody will call us how things went last week. Because we knew that your child or your loved one were going through this because you expressed it the week before. So this is a continuity of people that kind of support each other through a process that's very, very difficult.
And when you talk about those meetings and groups, if somebody wanted to find out more, certainly go to the website.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, the website has so much information. There's meetings, education, and resources, among many other things. But in the meetings, anyway, to get to if somebody wanted to participate or join a meeting or find out more about it, how would you suggest they get in touch with you?
So Learn to Cope, visit the website. And because we are so confidential and we want to have people there that need to be there and that are willing to be there. So there's a Stay Connected form. You fill out that form and that form goes to a regional manager in your area. And once that form gets to that regional manager, that regional manager will contact you and have that preliminary conversation, see where you are, and just have a little discussion around the website, how to use it, what kind of resources I have available to support the parents, and just describe basically what the meeting is all about.
Okay.
And one big thing that we talk about is that we don't really provide people the answer to their situation, but rather help them find their way.
Just guide them through it.
Help through that process.
Yeah. And being peer-led, that's the key, because they're hearing from people who have gone through it, and maybe there's something that comes out that they hadn't thought of, right?
Yes,
there's some
absolutely.
new approaches that they might say, hey, okay, I'll give that. Everything else isn't working, so maybe I'll try that, right?
Yeah. And one of the things we kind of give people permission to lead with compassion and really think about love. So the first place you go into, I love this person so much and I'm fighting for them, but against them because the addiction is them, right, at some point of their life. So how do we move through that and have to defend your loved one, accepting where they're at and having that passion and patience, right, to understand the process and work through that process to get to a healthier place. And that's very tough to do.
It's difficult in a normal parenting to do this, but under those challenges, it makes it even more so because everything's just so such a greater consequences for that, obviously. Now, you've been doing this for 20 years, right? You've been in the field for 20 years.
Yeah.
And to ask you a question that you know the answer to, has anything changed in 20 years?
A lot of things have changed in 20 years.
Yeah.
A lot of things have changed. I think that when I started working with families and children and all this, when somebody was suffering from addiction, they were addicted, right? They were in the corner. They were up to no good. They were often, still today, but not as, well, still today, very much involved with the criminal justice system.
Okay.
Resources were limited. When you go to the hospital, you were treated as a person that uses drugs, not treated like a patient.
Talk about the word stigma again. That was just so much the case back then, especially. Now
I think there's more of a community that embraces that there's people that suffer from an illness that they cannot control, and it's more difficult to control. And now there's a little bit better, and we're having more conversations about that. You could talk about that in some kitchen tables that you never did that before.
Yes, you're right. And I think even Learn to Cope is an example. You've been in it for 20 years. Learn to Cope has been in
Mm-hmm.
existence for 18 years. And organizations like Learn to Cope, a lot of them didn't exist then. But now with the wide resources, education, removing the stigma, creating awareness, and making people feel like, okay, I can talk about this and not hide it. At least you're hoping that that's the case. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you start talking about things, you get results, right? It's not.
When you hide them, you get nowhere. Right?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always a thing. And you know, there's a couple things. One, it's a greater awareness, and there's a lot of progress being made. On the other side of that, though, it's much worse because the access for fentanyl and different drugs is so much greater than it was before. So now you're fighting against that too. I mean, it's 100 times worse than it was then.
That is very
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
I know of the drug in the market. We have some relationship with people that have done some testings and do testing, and the drug of the market is not anymore heroin. You don't find any more heroin. That's what we hear here, and it's very dangerous. So the fact that we're progressing, the drugs are progressing too.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
have this constant battle, but education is the key, I think, for all of it. And as you're educated and you take the steps to get yourself better and you take the steps to kind of test your stuff, there's testing strips now. They're available. Actually, we have them in our center.
To test for fentanyl.
The test for fentanyl
Yeah.
that you can use. And there's a way to use it. There's information about this. We share this information with the groups, talk about it all the time, just making sure that if you're going to use, right, you test it. Use
Yeah.
it safely. Think about the consequences and the fact that we do not have a stable drug market. And that's key.
No, and it's just plain English, it's just more deadly than it used to be. And, you know, obviously with the overdoses now more than 100,000 a year, it's like every day. I mean, there's 300 people who are dying.
Yeah.
And yet it just pours in and then pours in and pours in and it's not stopping. I don't know, we can't do a whole lot about that aspect of it locally, but what we can do is what you're doing now, at least to combat that.
Mm-hmm.
But are you finding that you're getting ahead of it or falling behind it?
So I think that for us at Learn to Cope, we try to just be here for parents because things are going to happen. And just to provide that support to help parents move through that and loved ones move through that and just gather the skills to become healthier themselves, so to manage the situation. Because we have parents, and one of the most saddest part of this job is that parents lose their loved ones, right? And very often they do.
Yeah.
And so when they lose their loved ones, how can I come back to a group and feel that I lost, right, the person that I loved the most, that I came here for? What kind of message is going to bring to everybody else that's joining the group? So as Learn to Cope looked at that, came up with a different group, and that's Still Learning, Still Coping group. This is for families and parents who have lost a loved one.
It's called Still Learning, Still Coping.
Still Learning, Still Coping. Family have lost somebody, and now they have somebody else that still struggles. And so that group is very particular, is very intimate. We talk about the loss. We have conversation. We bring the loved one into the circle, the loved one that have been lost, into a circle of prayer. We talked about just remembrance and the life, and acknowledging the life that was lost. And then talk a little bit about how we could help you continue with this struggle, with this fight, to help your loved one that still struggles.
Yeah. And I've met with and spoken with many parents who have lost children, a few people who've been on the show as well. And I think what I find is a lot of them want to reach out and help other people who are going through it because they've lived it and they understand it, and you know, and I commend them for it because it's so difficult, because then you live with it every day. And not too unlike, we were talking about the Jack Jonah movie earlier, and you know, there's so many good reasons we did the movie. We wanted to create awareness locally, but I think it also got the community together in terms of the actors and the support people, everything. And a lot of friendships were made. And again, that awareness is still going on. And now I lost my point. But I think when you have parents like Jack Jonah and his parents, trying to do something after that to say, we want to try to step up and help other parents and other people who have lost children, got involved with that movie or other projects. And I think it just helps to know that other people, you're not alone. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because there's so many others that if you talk about it, you find that you're not alone. It's not just you, and there's some comfort in talking to other people who've been through it. It's the toughest thing you can imagine, and there's just too many friends who have lost their sons, and it seems to be mostly men. Proportionately, how is that?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of the groups that we see, there's men, but there's also a lot of women.
Yeah.
That are.
Is that changing,
involved.
or has it just been always that?
We talk to the parents mostly, and in our groups, like I said, it's a balance. It affects women, it affects men.
Yeah.
I think women just maintains it quiet longer, and services for women were not as permanent as they are right now.
Okay.
So there's more services for women now than there ever been, yeah, I think this is something that's really attacking anyone, and we're not really 100% immune, right, in our families to addictions.
No.
So
and that's the other thing too, is I guess partly why it's got a greater awareness too, is because what's happened, even like you said 20 years ago, oh well, you had that stigma, you were just the addict, and you're treated differently. But now I think what they've recognized too, because it affects anyone and everyone, every race, every age, gender, financial status, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. And the process is the same. Like families, whether you're wealthy or not, whether you're one race or another race,
it doesn't change.
It doesn't change. The family dynamics and the pain and the suffering that a loved one suffers, it's just the same. So it's important to get together with people, to find connections, to become healthier, to get healthy yourself, to be okay with taking care of yourself as much as you take care of your loved one, and to understand that you could walk with your loved one in recovery by their side, but not in front and not behind, just exactly by their side. Because when you start doing as a parent or as a loved one, you're used to taking care of the person you love, but as much as you take care of the person you love, you're taking away their ability to take care for themselves. So providing the opportunity for them to take care of themselves is very important in all this process, because they know what they need. You might want to care for them someday where you want to care for them, and then
it's what you've done.
Yes.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
So one of the parents in one of the groups we talked about, I cannot believe I tied his shoes, I changed him, I fed him, I did all this, and now I cannot make an appointment for him. And that just crushed her. She couldn't figure out why couldn't she make an appointment for her son, who's grown now, and for him to accept it. So that pain of all of that comes through. And having a conversation around spreading your pain, splitting it up, let's talk about this, and have some value in what you have to bring to this conversation, and what he has to bring to the action that he has to bring to maintain it. Let's bring some good value to that, and help you feel better, because now you know that you did all you could to help your loved one make that decision.
Yeah, and it's such a foreign thing, because you're right, it's almost an uncomfortable area for people, because it's so unfamiliar, right? To go into that territory of, like, I've never been in this position before, and they don't know what to do. Yeah. And this is, I think, why these groups are so important. some acceptance and some recognition to say, okay, I guess I'll step back, or I'll do this instead. Because I think the less people know, the more likely they are to make wrong decisions. You see that a lot, right?
We see that a lot. And another thing that I see a lot is something like this: as long as you fix my child, everything will be okay. And I think about that a lot, because we are a unit, right? The family, the community is a unit, and we can't separate a unit and fix one piece of the unit and not the whole unit. That doesn't exist. In my brain, I can't put it together.
It's like a severed arm.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to think about how do we help it and arrange those dynamics so the family could function again, and under what circumstances they're going to function again, and what are the expectations of that functioning again. And some of these groups will help people kind of figure that out, that this is part of what our life is going to be about, and this is the expectations that I need to put forth. So my child will follow it, and I will follow it, and now we could be back as being a family together, because we are a part of this family and a community, and it's all togetherness.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is, we talked on the phone the other day, and you talked about expectations. And that's a tough thing, because I've heard from many people before, and I'm sure you've heard from hundreds, if not thousands, of people say, okay, good, this person's finally going into rehab, everything's going to be good now. Whew. And it doesn't quite go that way, like that.
Oh, no.
And then afterwards, okay, what behavior existed prior to a person going into a program or rehab and coming out, and what needs to change for a family? How do they react and continue to support the right way? That's something that has to be learned and discussed. It's not just, here's your list of the top 10 things to do. You have to
practice.
Practice, yes.
Practice.
Yeah.
I think we get into a habit of doing things, right? We do things for habit,
Yeah.
and then you have that same thing that you do all the time.
Right.
So that's the same thing that happens. So when somebody is in recovery, comes back home after being in a treatment center for some time, and now we can't pick things up where we left them off.
Right.
There's have to be some change, because there's some change in the other part.
Right.
And so this whole idea, okay, now he's not here at this time, that means he's using. Let me call him and say, oh, are you using again? What are we because he's not, doesn't stay there. So you using again, that means that you're going to pain me, steal from me, be in trouble, and I have to get you out of jail. So whatever that post-traumatic stress stuff comes right back up.
Yeah.
They come right back up, and then we're kind of fighting against each other again.
And then that reaction triggers the other person to say something wrong or behave wrong, whatever. Something changes, yeah.
The whole thing changes.
And it erupts, yeah.
And then you have the person that's recovering, that has all these feelings about all the guilt, about all the things they have done, and all the things that have happened throughout their addiction. And all that get compounded. So some support needs to happen. It's very beneficial for a family to get, because that way we have learned our expectations, move around what is expected, what was expected then and what's the reality now, and kind of change it and move along the way and support that recovery the way that we can support it.
In my family, I think about as you were saying this, because in my family we had my aunt who passed away about 10 years ago. She was a heavy drinker, took drugs, mostly pills, and that just ruined her. She just he was in and out of rehabs, and it was tough at first because everybody was trying to do things for her. Oh yeah, you need money for your car insurance. Oh, here's $500. And it wouldn't be used for the car insurance. It'd be used for, and that was just an example. Oh, we'll help you. We'll pay your rent this month. And she'd say, oh yeah, just pay me. I'll pay the landlord. That didn't work either. But there was all kinds of things that we had learned throughout this, and then just enabling, for lack of a better word, this to continue and continue and continue. And then I know my mom, and who's been a guest on this show before too, was talking about how she went to Al-Anon and different groups and learned that about all the mistakes she made. And my aunt, my other aunt, my mom's sister, the two of them were trying to treat their sister and help, but a lot of it was counterproductive. And so over time, it just prolonged, and it actually got worse. She ended up dying, but even now, my mom will say, if I'd only known, if I'd only done this different, what would have changed? And all the mistakes she's made, but she just wasn't aware of. She learned too late. And so I guess the point of that is the earlier you know, the more these decisions may help save someone's life, right? The sooner you know, as soon as you see signs, as soon as you say the question of somebody needing support and you're not sure if it's the right thing, but of course you love that person, and you say, well, all right, and you give in, and that just enables it to perpetuate. So, and at what point, so I talked about the signs earlier, at what point does somebody say, hey, I'm going to look into this and see if I can find out more? Going on the website, you can learn about signs and symptoms, and but also too, at the point you confront somebody and say, hey, I suspect you have a problem, is already a pretty difficult conversation.
It is very difficult.
Yeah, and like in my aunt's case, we got the resistance, and we had a family intervention to say, hey, we're all aware of this. There was probably 15 of us there, and of course the denial, and we didn't do that right either because we just didn't know.
Well, one of the things that we talked about pretty often is that I don't think that you as a family did anything wrong. I just think that you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
So you were there with the greatest intentions,
right.
But it was up to her to make that choice or not. And at this point, you as a family tried the best to continue her health, right? To meet what their needs are. Not really realizing
that there's a help. Yeah.
That she might just needed to be accountable for the
right.
things that she couldn't do.
And maybe during that meeting, she felt pressured, and that pressure caused her to react the wrong way. So again, we didn't know.
Yeah. Yes, and I talked a lot. We talked a lot about honesty.
Yeah.
I mean, just bring the cards to the table and talk about what life is for you, and if you're not here, how are they going to manage life without that, and make that happen.
Yeah, and I think if a family's gone through it, again, sharing with others. If a family's gone through it, sharing with others that are in the early stages of doing it can be very, very helpful. Let's go back to Learn to Cope a little bit now, because you have 11,000 members. You have national recognition, but you're based out of Massachusetts.
The main office is in Taunton, Mass.
Okay.
But we have a regional center here in Western Mass, and it's
Okay.
in, we call it Hopeville. So it's in East Hampton.
Okay.
It's at the Eastwork Building.
Yeah.
We have some business hours, so the center is open. And we just invite people to stop by. If you
Okay.
have any questions, really concerns about your loved one, you have anything that you could think of that you feel that our group could be able to help.
Yeah, and you're not a rehab center. You're not a recovery center.
No.
You're a peer-led network. A great place for people to start.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And we'll connect you with some resources that we have available because we are linked into this greater system of care in one way or another, and providing support for families. But you come in with your question, and guess what? Everybody else that's with you could get the help too.
Right.
So we just have those conversations about help.
And we mentioned the website a few times, Learn to Cope, learn the number
number
2
two.
cope.org. But is there a phone number?
Phone number. So we have a phone number for the center, and the center's phone number is 413-203-9900. Oh, easy number. It's 413-203-9900.
Perfect.
I never called myself, so.
Well, now commit that to memory. I'm glad you had that in front of you.
Yes.
Before Learn to Cope, you were at the DA office.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about your work there.
So my work at the DA's office was community education. And so I organized the Hampden County Addiction Task Force. And just in Hampden County, there's providers that are interested in promoting or helping with the crisis of addiction. And so they gather on a monthly basis, and we do trainings, and we did the meetings still happen. It's one time a month. People get together to network and learn about other resources available throughout the county.
Yeah. Okay.
Just great work that
And the
Dia
task
Balloon
force
doing.
is still in place, even though you're not there heading
I'm
it
not
up.
there, but yeah, somebody else is there heading
Okay.
that. That's a collaboration between the district attorney's office and the sheriff department.
Okay.
Just great group of people that really get together and they're passionate about helping and looking at the system of care and looking about the system of care involving and including the law enforcement piece. And it's very good. So I would say if you're interested, just give a call to the district attorney's office or the sheriff department and just get in touch with the people from the Hampden County Addiction Task Force.
Okay.
It's a great place to make connections.
Good. And, one of the things we didn't talk about, too, and I feel like I'm shifting a little bit, but is the bilingual aspect. Obviously, you're bilingual.
Yes.
And you came from Puerto Rico in the mid-'90s?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So I
You were
came
just
up
a kid then, right?
I was just a kid. Yeah, very young. No. Yeah. So and I worked, and this is one of my passions. I just came here from Puerto Rico. Really did not know the language much, and had to maneuver my way through learning and understanding. And I don't have any, so far. What do they say? Maybe I do, but some sort of mental health issue or some sort of anything like that. And it was very hard to just get accustomed to a place that didn't sound like my own and didn't feel like my own. And we have these long winters that are terrible. And most people that move to the States to a little apartment without a yard. So all these things that happen, a change of life that is so difficult to manage. So way back, I started working with families. And I said to myself, I need to do something for these families to help them connected to the rest of the system of care. And me being that intermediary between them and the system of care will work.
And that got you into this.
And that got me into this. And I started doing social work, and I'm doing public health communications, and that's what I did for the last how many years.
And I think it's especially important if somebody doesn't speak English or speak it well enough to feel comfortable. They can certainly reach you at this number. And you have others that are bilingual in your organization, right?
So actually, I am the person that's
You are it.
Yes.
All right.
I am it.
All right.
For my organization so far
right.
that speaks Spanish and could help people along the way.
But that's important to know, because if a lot of people like to talk about the challenges that you had, especially if you're going through some sort of a family trauma and it's dire need, you need to have that comfort level that you can actually communicate this correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a few things that happen here is that, yes, the state provides people with interpreters, and interpreters are very valuable. However, when you have a support group, how can an interpreter really help with that process, right? Because it's
an intimate, passionate thing. It's hard to...
It's hard to bring about that connection and that passion and much more. I think that when I talk about my feelings, now I've been here for many years and I speak English very well. But then when I didn't, I prefer to speak it in my native tongue and with people that could understand that. So we're here for that, to provide that space.
That's good for people to know, because I don't know how... There's certainly a lot of other programs that have bilingual, but it's good to know that you guys do, because prior to you joining, they didn't have that. Anything else about Learn to Cope that we didn't get to talk about that pops into your head?
A lot of people tend to not come into the doors, and they come through the doors with their hair of fire and finding that answer, and they just have to give it a time to find that purpose, because the answers do not come right away. The same way you cannot expect your person with substance use disorder to switch their turn their switch off and they're cured.
It's
now.
not instant gratification.
It's not
no.
instant gratification. We work through the process. You're really going to find a group of people that care,
Yeah.
that have been there, done that,
Mhm.
and that are willing to embrace and move along the way with you in the process of healing.
Mhm.
There's a lot of healing happening and a lot of groups happening
Yeah.
that will help you
It's
through
like
that.
anything that heals. You know, you have knee
Mhm.
surgery. It takes a long time. You don't wake up and say, "Oh, my surgery's done. Everything's back to normal." No, that doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't happen that way.
So,
Yeah. And just I would exhort people to visit the website. There's
yeah.
tremendous amount of information. There we have Yoga Nidra to help people with meditation. We have well-being weekends.
The webinars.
Webinars. The
Yeah.
webinars are just amazing. We have
Yeah.
people from all over the world, like really talking to us about these things. And I'll tell you a curious thing about my Spanish group. Have gotten people from South America join online
Wow.
on Zoom on a Wednesday night. I have spoken with people from Colombia, from Mexico, from Peru, in
Wow.
Puerto Rico, people that are literally in their home country just joining in via Zoom. California. So it's not, we're here in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
but we're reaching.
But just the fact that you're reaching out that far, and you've got a fantastic reputation, and I think the way Learn to Cope has grown, and what you've done is phenomenal. It really
Thank
is. And I again, you've mentioned the website. I was pretty impressed with what's on there, and if somebody didn't know anything, is the first time being exposed to this problem,
Mhm,
this
mhm.
is a fantastic place to start. You know?
It is. It actually is.
Well, we will have to have you back again to talk about what's happening. And
Sure.
thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
And again, Learn to Cope. Learn the number 2, cope.org. Visit the website. And what the other program was, Still Learning, Still Coping.
Still Learning, Still Coping is one of the particular groups for
Yeah.
Learn to Cope.
Okay, didn't want to forget that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Magda, and thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you all soon. Thank you.